How annoying could one kid be?
Back before streaming, networks didn't have the algorithm. They had Thursday night, a sweaty ratings chart, and one magical panic button, the crossover episode. Because nothing says, please keep watching, like seeing a character you recognize wander into a totally different show, like they took a wrong turn at craft services. And look, some crossovers are genuinely fun. They're like a victory lap. The characters fit, the tone matches, and the whole thing feels like a little bonus for loyal viewers. But tonight, we're not talking about those. Tonight is about the forced crossovers. The ones that feel less like a story and more like a network executive clearing their throat and saying, what if we combine the two things people already like and called it an event? The ones where the worlds don't naturally connect. The tone whiplash is real, and continuity basically gets tossed into a dumpster behind the studio. Sometimes it's a gimmick, like a citywide blackout that conveniently affects exactly the right cast members at exactly the right time. Sometimes it's a shared universe move, where a character pops up in another show's living room with zero explanation, like they've been neighbors for years. And sometimes it's a full-on genre collision, where you're watching a normal sitcom and suddenly an alien shows up and nobody acts like that's insane. So let's count down 10 of the most forced TV crossovers before the year 2000. The ones that made you squint at your screen, laugh out loud, and then ask yourself the most important question of all. Wait, who approved this? 10. Chicago Hope and Picket Fences. There's a special kind of crossover that feels like it was designed by someone staring at a network schedule and thinking, okay, how do we get viewers from show A to stay for show B? And Chicago Hope crossing over with Picket Fences is a prime example, because these shows live in totally different emotional climates. Chicago Hope is big city hospital drama. The lighting is serious. The stakes are high. People talk like they're in the middle of a moral crisis, even when they're ordering coffee. Picket Fences, meanwhile, is that wonderfully odd small-town universe where the tone can swing from heartfelt to bizarre in the span of one conversation. It's charming, it's strange, and it's proudly operating on its own wavelength. So when characters from the quirky small-town world get funneled into the intense hospital drama, the crossover doesn't feel like two stories naturally colliding. It feels like a portal opened, like someone took a snow globe and shook it into another snow globe just to see what happens. That's the forced part. Both shows are good at what they do, but together, they highlight how different they are. Suddenly, you're not immersed. You're watching the seams. You're thinking about the mechanics of television. You're thinking, oh, this is the night they wanted me to watch both shows. And that's the hallmark of a forced crossover. It doesn't deepen the world. It reveals the wiring behind it. Because once you notice the crossover is basically a delivery system, get these characters here. You can't unsee it. And as we'll see, networks got really good at inventing reasons to move characters around, even if those reasons were completely ridiculous. 9. NBC Blackout Thursday. Mad About You, Friends. If you ever needed proof that TV networks love a theme night, let's talk about the sitcom crossover concept that screams programming strategy. The blackout. Because nothing connects multiple shows quite like the power company becoming a plot device. On Blackout Thursday, NBC basically treated its comedy lineup like one long story. The idea is simple. New York loses power, and different shows show how their characters deal with it. It's clever in a scheduling sense. Viewers stick around because it feels like you're watching one big event instead of separate episodes. But story-wise, it's hilariously transparent. A blackout is one of those things that can happen anywhere, anytime, which is exactly why it's perfect crossover glue. It doesn't require deep continuity. It doesn't require a believable reason for characters to meet. It just creates isolated little situations. People stuck in elevators, apartments going dark, candles coming out, someone giving a dramatic speech while holding a flashlight under their chin like they're telling ghost stories at camp. The crossover is less about the characters and more about the concept. You're not thinking, wow, what an organic shared universe. You're thinking, oh, this is the night NBC decided we're all experiencing one large inconvenience together. And the funniest part is how sitcoms treat it like a once-in-a-lifetime event. Like New York City, famous for never having any problems, has never, ever lost power before. Everybody acts like civilization is teetering on the edge. Meanwhile, the audience is just sitting there going, so the network wanted us to stay through the whole lineup. Got it. It's not the worst kind of forced crossover. At least it's coherent. But it's definitely one of the most obvious. And trust me, it gets even more obvious when the shared event becomes a full-blown weather apocalypse. 8. The Golden Girls, Empty Nest, and Nurses, Hurricane Saturday. If the blackout was NBC's cute little "we're all connected" experiment, the hurricane was the network saying, cool, now let's do it bigger. Because nothing says crossover event like a storm so convenient it feels less like weather and more like a scheduling memo. This is the classic shared disaster crossover. The Golden Girls, Empty Nest, and Nurses all get tied together through the same hurricane hitting Miami. In theory, it sounds natural. Same city, same night, same crisis. In practice, it's one of the clearest examples of a crossover being built from the outside in. The hurricane isn't there because a writer thought, this story demands a storm. The hurricane is there because the network thought, this storm can carry our viewers from one show to the next, like a conveyor belt. So you get characters conveniently ending up where they shouldn't normally be. You get emotional beats that are doing double duty. Part genuine sitcom heart, part, and now watch the next show. You get a whole night of television where the real star isn't the cast. It's the meteorological excuse that makes the crossover possible. And that's what makes it feel forced. The storm becomes the glue. It's the universal excuse for why someone drops by, why someone stays over, why someone can't get home, why someone is suddenly part of another show's story. It's basically a narrative rideshare service. To be fair, there's something charming about these old school event nights. They feel communal, like the whole audience is in on it. But they're also incredibly transparent. You can practically hear the announcer voice between commercials. And next, the hurricane continues, which is why the hurricane crossover is such a perfect bridge to the next kind of forced crossover, one that doesn't need weather at all. It just needs one breakout character, a network's thirst for ratings, and a complete lack of concern for reality. Happy Days meets Mork from Ork. There are forced crossovers, and then there are forced crossovers where you have to pause and remember. Television used to just do things. Like fully commit to an idea that sounds like it came from a dare. And Happy Days introducing Mork might be the most "wait what?" example of the entire pre-2000 era. Because Happy Days is the ultimate comfort show. It's diners and dates and leather jackets and the gentle hum of mid-century nostalgia. It's a world where the biggest threat is usually embarrassment, or a minor misunderstanding that can be solved by the end of the episode. And then suddenly, alien. That's not a tonal shift. That's a genre collision. That's like someone opening a trapdoor in the floor of the sitcom and dropping science fiction into it like a glitter bomb. The forced part isn't just the premise, it's how casually the show presents it. You're watching a series built on familiar, grounded comedy rhythms, and now you're asked to accept that an extraterrestrial being is interacting with these characters. Like, this is a totally normal Tuesday. It's the TV equivalent of your friend saying, "Anyway, my roommate is from Mars," and then continuing the conversation without acknowledging how insane that is. Of course, the real reason is obvious. Mork was a breakout idea, Robin Williams was electric, and the network smelled a spinoff. So the crossover isn't about Happy Days needing this story. It's about Happy Days being a delivery vehicle, a big popular platform to launch a new thing. And to be clear, it worked. It worked so well that it makes the whole episode feel like a prototype. Here's the weird new character. Please like him. New show coming soon. That's why it belongs on this list. It's a forced crossover that accidentally becomes history. But forced is forced, and we haven't even reached the era where networks would mash heroes together with the subtlety of a marching band. 6. Batman, 1966, and the Green Hornet. Sometimes a crossover feels forced because the worlds don't match. Other times it feels forced because you can tell it's basically a public handshake between two properties. And the Batman and Green Hornet crossover is exactly that. A bright, cheerful, look, our heroes know each other moment that feels less like storytelling and more like brand management. Now, on paper, it sounds like it should work. Two masked crime fighters, two iconic themes, two shows that understand the joy of a dramatic entrance. But even in the 1960s, these characters live in slightly different vibes. Batman is full camp, full color, full pop art madness. It's a world where punching a guy produces a sound effect the size of a billboard. The Green Hornet is still pulpy and fun, but it plays things straighter. The action is more grounded. The tone is more crime story than comic strip come to life. So when you bring them together, you don't just get a team up, you get a tonal negotiation. And the forced part is how the crossover leans into spectacle over necessity. The meeting itself is the point. You can feel the structure, big introductions, the recognition moment, the wow, it's really them reaction, and then the team-up poses that look like they were designed to be printed on lunchboxes. It's not that it's unwatchable, it's that it's unmistakably an event. It's the television version of two mascots showing up at halftime and high-fiving at center field. You're enjoying the novelty, but you're also aware you're watching a stunt. This is the crossover as a billboard. It's the network saying, hey fans of this thing, try the other thing. And once you notice that, you start spotting the same energy everywhere. Especially in the 1990s, when crossovers became an assembly line. Because if a crossover can function like an advertisement, networks quickly learned the most effective ad of all. Take the most popular character on the most popular night and drop them into whatever show needs help. Which brings us to the era of one man, one catchphrase, and one very confused plane ticket. 5. Full House meets Family Matters. Urkel visits the Tanners. There are crossovers that feel like two worlds colliding. And then there are crossovers that feel like a network literally picked up a character and moved him like a chess piece. Steve Urkel showing up on Full House is the definition of that, because Full House has its own warm, family-focused bubble. Big lessons, big hugs, and a living room that always looks like it's ready for a heartfelt speech. Family Matters has heart too, but its center of gravity becomes Urkel, a walking tornado of energy, catchphrases, and physical comedy that can take over an episode in about 12 seconds. So when Urkel appears at the Tanner house, it doesn't feel like an organic crossover. It feels like an audience recognition moment, delivered directly to your screen. The door opens, and you can practically hear the studio audience react before anyone even says a word. The episode becomes about the fact that Urkel is there, and that's why it's forced. There's no natural reason that makes you go, ah yes, of course Urkel would end up here. It's more like the network would like to remind you that TGIF exists, and Urkel is basically the mayor of it. Even the logistics are part of the joke. Different cities, different families, different setups, none of it matters because the real goal is simple. Get Urkel in front of the Full House audience and let him do his thing. He's the crossover payload. And once you see it like that, the whole crossover becomes hilariously transparent. This isn't Full House borrowing a character for a story. This is Full House hosting a guest appearance like it's a variety show. But the funniest part? The network wasn't done. Because if Urkel can wander into one sitcom, why not make him wander into another? In a way that's so blatantly manufactured, it barely qualifies as plot. Which leads us to the crossover that feels like the TV equivalent of a relay race handoff. 4. Family Matters and Step by Step, Urkel's handoff crossover. If Urkel showing up on Full House felt like the network picking up a character and dropping him somewhere new, the Family Matters to Step by Step crossover feels like the network didn't even bother pretending. This is crossover as Baton Pass, a neat, tidy little stunt designed to keep you on the couch through the next time slot. The forced energy here is off the charts because the crossover is structured like a handoff moment. You watch one episode, then the next show begins, and, surprise, the character you just saw is still on your screen, like he simply walked across the commercial break. It's less shared universe and more network conveyor belt. And sure, it's fun in that goofy TGIF way. It's built for applause. It's built for the audience at home to go, "Oh, he's still here." It's the kind of thing that made Friday nights feel like an event when you were watching live. But story logic? That's not the priority. The priority is momentum. The priority is making you feel like you're in the middle of something bigger than one show. Like you're watching the TGIF cinematic universe before anyone called it that. That's why it makes no sense in a very specific way. Not because the characters couldn't theoretically meet, but because the crossover isn't driven by character choices. It's driven by programming needs. Urkel is used like a human bookmark. Don't change the channel. You're still in the same vibe. And the funniest part is how quickly the receiving show becomes a stage for the guest star. For a moment, the regular cast feels like they're reacting to a visiting celebrity rather than living their own sitcom lives. Everything bends around the crossover. This is the purest form of the forced crossover. A character is not crossing over because the story demands it. The character is crossing over because the night demands it. And once you accept that, you realize networks would do the exact same thing in animation too, except cartoons have no rules, which means the forced crossovers get even weirder. 3. The Jetsons and the Flintstones cartoons have an unfair advantage in crossovers. They can break reality with zero consequences. Time travel? Sure. Space travel? Why not? A talking dog driving a car? Of course. And yet, even with that flexibility, the Jetsons crossing over with the Flintstones still feels like one of the most "this exists because marketing mashups" ever created. Both shows are built on a simple, strong gag. The Flintstones is modern suburban life translated into the Stone Age. Dinosaurs as appliances, rocks as technology, and the joke being that everything is primitive but somehow still functions like a 1960s sitcom. The Jetsons is the reverse. Futuristic convenience, flying cars, robot maids, and that optimistic, shiny version of tomorrow. They're mirror images, which makes them perfect brand siblings, but awkward story partners. Because when you combine them, what's the actual point? The joke becomes, look, the future met the past. That's it. That's the pitch. It's novelty first, story second. You're not watching because the worlds naturally intersect. You're watching because it's the cartoon version of putting two famous cereal mascots on the same box. And the forced part comes from the logic gymnastics required to make it happen. Time travel becomes a convenient hallway connecting two entirely different gimmick worlds. Characters meet, react, and then settle into sitcom rhythm like this kind of thing happens all the time. It's fun, sure, but it also makes you aware that you're watching an event. It's an animated TV movie that exists largely because the idea of it is irresistible to executives. Two iconic properties, one big special, instant attention. And honestly, that's kind of the theme of this whole list. The most forced crossovers are the ones where you can see the headline before you see the story. Which brings us to the next one. Because if cartoons can smash worlds together with a time machine, live action shows sometimes do it by smashing tones together with a courtroom case. 2. Ally McBeal with The Practice. This crossover is fascinating because it's not about geography or gimmicks. It's about tone, and the tone clash is the entire experience. Ally McBeal and The Practice are both legal shows, sure, but they're legal shows from completely different planets. The Practice is grounded. It's heavy. It's the kind of show where people look tired. The stakes feel real, and the courtroom feels like a place where lives unravel. Ally McBeal, on the other hand, is heightened and quirky. It's emotional, surreal, and often plays like the inside of someone's brain when they're overthinking everything at once. So when you force these two worlds into a crossover, it can feel like watching two temperatures collide. The serious show steps into the weird show's reality and has to pretend it belongs there. The quirky show suddenly has to share oxygen with a series that treats the law like a grinding, high-stakes machine. And the forced part isn't that the characters can't meet, it's that the crossover makes you hyper-aware of the difference in storytelling language. One show is built for sharp realism. The other is built for vibes, anxiety, and heightened reactions. When they merge, you can almost feel the writers negotiating. Okay, how do we keep this grounded, but still keep it Ally? It's also the perfect example of a crossover existing, because it's a big deal on paper. Two popular shows, same general genre, one special night. That's a network event. That's attention. That's buzz. But to the viewer, it can feel like a controlled experiment. What happens if we pour one show into another? The answer is, sometimes it's entertaining, and sometimes it feels like you're watching the seams stretch. And if tone clashes are your thing, the number one entry is the ultimate version of that, because it takes a paranoid, serious pop culture phenomenon and drops it into the silliest town in America. Number 1, The Simpsons and The X-Files. If you had to pick one pre-2000 crossover that screams, this should not work, it's The Simpsons bringing in Mulder and Scully. Because The X-Files is built on dread. It's shadows and paranoia, government conspiracies, and that constant feeling that something is lurking just off screen. It takes itself seriously. Even when it gets weird, it's serious weird. The Simpsons is Springfield, a place where logic goes to take a nap, a town where the rules are whatever makes the joke land. So when The X-Files arrives, the crossover becomes a beautiful disaster in the best possible way. The entire comedy is the contrast. Two dead serious agents walking into a world that refuses to behave like a serious mystery. Mulder is looking for truth. Scully is looking for evidence. Springfield is looking for snacks. And what makes it feel forced, while still being iconic, is that the crossover's existence is the point. It's pure pop culture event television. It's the kind of episode where the audience tunes in not because the story was demanded, but because the headline is irresistible. The X-Files is on The Simpsons. It's also a perfect example of a crossover that's basically a genre prank. The show takes these serious characters, drops them into chaos, and then watches the tone implode in slow motion. And yet, because The Simpsons is so good at absorbing anything, it somehow becomes entertaining instead of just awkward. But make no mistake, this is still forced crossover energy at its finest. It's not about continuity. It's not about building a shared universe. It's about the thrill of seeing two massive cultural institutions collide for one night. And when you think about it, that's why forced crossovers are so memorable. Even when they don't make sense, they leave an impression, like TV's way of saying, we did it because we could. So what have we learned from these pre-2000 crossover experiments? Mainly that networks have always had the same instinct. When viewership gets competitive, when a lineup needs a boost, or when a new show needs a spotlight, crossovers become the emergency flair. And the more forced the crossover, the more you can feel the strategy behind it. A blackout isn't just a blackout. It's a way to connect episodes across a night. A hurricane isn't just a hurricane. It's a way to keep you watching through multiple time slots. A breakout character doesn't just guest star. He becomes a mobile ratings device you can drop into any living room with a studio audience. Sometimes the result is charming, because old school TV had this communal feeling. When you watched live, you really did feel like everyone was watching the same thing together. And a crossover night felt like an event. Like TV was throwing a party and inviting all its characters into the same room. But the forced ones? Those are the crossovers that accidentally become the funniest. Because they reveal the trick. They show you the machine. They remind you that behind every wow they met moment, there's usually someone in a suit saying, "Okay, how do we keep the audience from changing the channel?" Now, I want to hear from you. Which crossover felt the most forced? Which one made you say, "No way this is real"? And, be honest, which one did you secretly love anyway, even though it made absolutely no sense? Because the truth is, forced crossovers are like TV junk food. You know it's ridiculous. You know it's engineered. And yet, sometimes you still want another bite.